Hi there. Real pleasure to be here. There's obviously a lot happening in technology and healthcare, and a huge amount of attention and focus, as we heard today, about where we can go with healthcare, how we can reinvent elements of it. And I thought before we went sort of into the future, we took a look backwards a bit, sort of old school medicine. I had an opportunity to do that about a year ago. I returned to Massachusetts General Hospital, where I was lucky to do my residency in both internal medicine and pediatrics, and it was the 200th anniversary of MGH, sort of a big deal, kind of a reunion of the house staff. These are the guys you went to war with before these little 80-hour work weeks. And of course, being in Boston, we could complain about walking uphill both ways in the snow. And so one night after a reception, I found myself in one of the famous spots of healthcare history. This is the Ether Dome, the site where in 1846, this lucky gentleman was the first guy to get general anesthesia with a surgery, kind of a big deal. And that room, the Ether Dome, has sort of been frozen in time since then. You can still see the same sponge they used, and we have grand rounds there, occasionally some special events, frozen in time. I wandered down the hall about 4 minutes away to the Bigelow ward, where I spent my first month as a green young intern, and to my sort of shock and dismay and a little bit of PTSD, that hadn't really changed so much. Some of the same alarms, some of the same nurses, some of the same patients. Only difference was that the poor little intern was pushing around a cart with an electronic medical record, which he had to print out and put in the paper chart. So my thought, even at Massachusetts General Hospital, is as we've touched upon a couple of times today, that medicine is still very sort of siloed. It's still sort of done as it's been done for over 100 years, sort of based in departments and often fiefdoms, and especially in academics. And we have the opportunity to sort of redefine healthcare now, the genomic world, not just a bucket of body parts or a bunch of ologies, but to rethink healthcare in new ways if we're going to address some of the grand challenges we have, from the aging demographic to the shortage of primary care physicians to the challenges of how to take this big data and make it useful, and obviously the regulatory and reimbursement landscape. Now, one of the major changes that are happening, you're all aware of, is ACOs. The shift of spending fee-for-service is starting to move to the left to incentivize to keep our patients healthier. And increasingly, we can use technology to do that. Technology is also enabling us to take what used to be done only in the ICU or the hospital and move it increasingly to our homes and even onto our own bodies. So let's take a look. In the last 12 years or so, since I came back to Stanford to do fellowships in hematology and oncology, a lot has really happened. A lot of these things, as Rich mentioned, are riding exponential waves. They're doubling, not linear. Like 30 linear steps, I'd be to the top of the room. 30 exponential steps, I'd be around the planet 64 times. And that's where that disruption and opportunity is for big change that is disrupting whole industries, whether that's the way we read books, the way we share the news. It's obviously changing the social matrix in many ways. And if you don't reinvent yourself like Amazon has done, you may be the next Kodak, for example, in terms of the realm of disruption. So where's that happening in healthcare? Well, the price of genomics, and we'll hear more about that in the next session, is dropping actually at twice the rate of Moore's Law, where we're near the point where we'll be at a $100 genome. I had my exome done for $1,000. I have a file on my laptop, don't quite know what to do with it yet, but patient burdens with genome, still a challenge, but there's huge opportunities as we move into this personalized medicine age, and it's not just genomics, it's the proteome, it's our environmental data, it's clinical imagery, it's our gut biome, for example. All those things are coming together in new ways. Faster computing enabled by Moore's Law is certainly enabling the surgeon now to reconstruct patients and personalize and individualize therapy. In the neuroscience realm, we can now look inside the brain and not only see amazing anatomy, but the connectome, and understand potentially pathologies, the effects of drugs or interventions such as meditation and medication in real time. And the combination of these things, particularly with high-speed cloud-based computing, is now disrupting clinical fields. So for example, the cardiac angiogram you're all familiar with, an hour in the cath lab, a spin-out from Stanford called HeartFlow has developed a way to take a 30-second CT scan, send it to the cloud, analyze your coronary artery. In this case, there's 40% narrowing. And what used to be done with a catheter or balloon measurements directly can be done computationally with massively parallel computers in the cloud, and compute that FFR, send that back to the cardiologist, and what will happen if you put a stent in? How do you individualize that therapy? How do you give that patient if they need it? They just published in JAMA, I think last month, the gold standard they compared it to, and they can probably do these cases for $3,000 less than normal. Other realms, for example, cardiac heart failure hasn't changed. Now we can do 5-minute cardiac MRIs and reconstruct that data in the cloud and access that through your laptop. So lots happening in the imaging world. Clearly on the exponential has been the mobile world. We're now in the world of mobile health, mHealth. Our phones are rapidly becoming healthcare tools and platforms. It's only been, 2.5 years since the iPad came out, and now I think 70% of US physicians use them. And now we're in the world, I'm holding a $35 Android tablet being sold now in India. these can be almost given away, and they have implications both for healthcare, education, and beyond. So low-cost tablets are emerging, and clearly these enable sort of dashboards into our health, whether that's for diabetes, to see your sugars and integrate changes. For example, this company did a study and lowered hemoglobin A1C by 2 points compared to the control group at 0.5. That's bigger than most blockbuster drugs. We're at the point where we start prescribing apps instead of drugs, you know? Pregnancy hasn't changed that often. So similar things can be individualized in an app you give to a patient. And we're adding new patient engagement tools, gamification, getting people engaged. For example, pediatric oncology patients at Packard Children's, where I train, can play games where they shoot their tumor and stay more engaged and with higher compliance. Now, this digitization is not just in our smartphones, but the smartphones are going beyond the sort of normal two-way communication. They're becoming essentially the tricorders of the future. So just last week, you know, you can use the camera phone, the accelerometer. Last week, my friend Dave Albert's company, AliveCor, was FDA approved for this EKG in a case. And I'm going to show you my live EKG. You'll see how nervous I am right here. And it's being done on the smartphone. It's being sent to the cloud. Dr. Dave can take a look at it. We passed this around at a conference once. He called me, who had the heart block? We didn't know. I've used this on airplanes, for example. So that's the kind of technology that's moving to mobile diagnostics in our hand. This world of quantified self, starting kind of with data geeks, has now enabled you know, scales that will tweet your weight, smart connected blood pressure cuffs, exercise monitoring, to the point where there are now tattoos that have shrunk that can measure vital signs and fall off a couple weeks later. Now, this is being leveraged with this new world of point-of-care diagnostics, particularly through high-speed microfluidics that can do lab tests at pennies on the dollar, give us, you know, texture exactly what malaria it is, what genetics it has, what antibiotic is useful. Some of those point-of-care tests can even be printed at the point of care on demand. So we're changing the way we can access medical care, bringing first-world care anywhere on the planet, whether that's rural Arkansas or rural India, sort of the digital checkup anywhere you might be. Now, there's layering of this data, and it becomes a challenge now, this big data era. How do we start to make sense of this? The data is now coming from inside our bodies, for example, implantable defibrillators. And my friend Hugo here has an AICD placed, and the company who owns it won't give him his own detailed data. Who owns this data? What if we start to unsilo it and crowdsource it and make it more useful as opposed to the old way we've been doing things? The challenge for us poor clinicians is we can be overwhelmed by this. We can barely read 4 hours a month of journals. The complexity of healthcare is getting to the point where we need some help. And the realm that I think is going to really change that dramatically in the next few years is artificial intelligence. How many of you saw IBM Watson beat the champions in Jeopardy a year and a half ago, right? Well, I like to call this not AI, a little threatening, but IA, intelligence augmentation. And the IBM Watson has gone to medical school and essentially is starting to help physicians both in diagnostics and in workup. And the whole spectrum of care is going to be impacted by IA in powerful ways, to the point where I think all these data feeds from our wearable devices, like the Fitbit I'm wearing, to implanted devices in our cars even, will give us the equivalent of an OnStar for the body. Because you know, you don't really care about the temperature in piston 3, you care when your check engine light goes on. What would be the equivalent of your check engine light, or that of your clinic, or that of your hospital, that can give you foresight and action ahead of time? Now, we mentioned the tricorder. We have some folks here from the X Prize. And in fact, the tricorder is coming to reality. There are already ultrasound devices that are extremely powerful that do elements of that. There's now a Qualcomm tricorder X Prize, $10 million. There's over 250 teams from around the world that have entered this contest to merge AI, mobile, smart diagnostics at the home for the consumer. And in fact, these are already out there. There's no video, unfortunately. A company that I helped that's upstairs for me at NASA Ames has already developed a technology which looks into the future. In a year or so, you know, we're normally unconnected to our healthcare data. It's sort of only when we have a problem. But imagine now at home, instead of having a thermometer and maybe a blood pressure cuff or a scale, a kid has a rash. You don't know what it is. You may take out your smart tricorder device, use the simple camera. It can then scan a whole realm and use AI algorithms. Say, does this kid have a measles or chickenpox or something severe? Oh, just roseola, not a big deal. Rest at home, easy, right? So these sorts of tools are using smart things that we have today, putting them together. Or there's an outbreak of a whooping cough in the area. You have to need an update. Well, can you easily then make that appointment, know where to go, who to avoid? All kind of leveraging, again, the connectivity that's only started to emerge in the last decade. Or let's say your daughter has a high fever and she's sick at home, it's 3 in the morning. Do you need to go to the emergency room or not? Well, Lucy's got a fever. Let's look at her other symptoms and connect that to a smart device that can not only measure her vital signs, but maybe prompt you to do a smart point of care urinalysis. Get that data and decide, well, she does have a UTI. She needs to go to the ER. What ER is actually available? How do you get there? What's the waiting time, for example? All that is sort of available to now. If it can be converged and put together in smart ways. And the funny tagline here, we might be checking our body as often as we check our email, which for some of us might be a problem. And in fact, this company just has a prototype that came out last week that I'm actually holding, and I'll try and do a bit of a live demo, but it's called the Scout. And if I take my smartphone, I can actually hold this now and connect this and basically get an integrated set of data, which will look like this. Oops, I just disconnected it, live demos. But you hold it to your forehead, and I'm basically going to get a stream of data, as you see there on the left, which in about 20 seconds results in the scan results you see on the right. That's sort of the first level of this advanced thing, and I think in the future this will connect to AI agents and beyond to help you make smarter decisions. I can show that live in the lobby later. So we're now connecting to our family, to our friends, to our physicians in newer, powerful ways. We're leveraging the social network, not just, for example, understanding that our genetics cause disease, but our behaviors, our networks. If we can look in the mirror and see the healthy us, if we stay on top of our behavior, which way we're going to go, or if we go in the wrong direction, what's going to happen? I can actually download an app now and see what happens if I am now, and if I gain 50 pounds, I'm going to go, ooh, I might skip dessert. So augmented reality can change our perceptions. We're now enabling the disabled, now with robotics merging with the body, the exoskeleton, the e-legs from Exobionics, for example, enabling the paralyzed to walk. However, we want to cure the paralyzed now with the world of regenerative medicine, which is what I've studied for the last 15 years at Stanford. Shinya Yamanaka there on the bottom won the Nobel Prize now for developing your own personalized stem cells. You can program a skin cell, for example, to be any of your tissue types. And we have the potential to leverage that with the new world that's moving quickly of 3D printing. You can almost design anything now and print it on a computer. Now we're starting to merge that, not just printing a violin or maybe an element for neurosurgery, but in tissue. Trachea, seeded with the patient's own stem cells, have been transplanted that aren't rejected. So the early ages of regenerative medicine moving eventually to complex 3D printed organs. So it's one thing to reinvent these elements, but clearly unless we reinvent how we pay, it's going to be a challenge because we don't, as we know, practice evidence-based medicine. We practice reimbursement-based medicine. So we need to rethink those things as well and leverage some of these new technologies as we reinvent healthcare. As was mentioned, I've been chairing the medicine track at Singularity University. It's a new institution based at NASA Ames in Silicon Valley. Each summer, we bring together 80 amazing students from around the planet and teach them to think about where technology is going, how to leverage that to address major problems, including global health, poverty, education. Some amazing companies and teams have come out of that, one using unmanned aerial vehicles to deliver drugs and vaccines, kind of like the Pony Express, but with low-cost UAVs. A Harvard Medical student-led team this summer developed a glove with integrated devices for doing enhanced telemedicine and medical exams, for example. And because medicine's been such a focal point, I put together a program called Future Med, which is a one-week deep dive for physicians, for IT folks, for pharma, to bring together new minds from different clinical fields to look at where healthcare is going and how we can reinvent some of these elements. So the next one will be in February. Okay, so new players are coming into healthcare. Many people have never been in healthcare before. There's new incubators, new accelerators. All this convergence can be allowing us to rethink medicine. But technology is not enough. It's often the design element, right? As we learned from Apple and others, if you put things together in smart ways, for example, if I have a car and I want to fly back to San Francisco, I'm not just going to put wings on it to get there. I might want to build a spaceship or a jet, but it's a system around it, right? And there's lessons we can learn from systems like aviation, as was mentioned by the governor actually earlier, from the flying world. I've been a pilot since I ran the flying club at Brown University. I joined the Air National Guard as a flight surgeon when I was a resident at MGH. I've been flying in fighter jets for the last decade or so as the doctor for the pilots. And there's a lot of lessons from the aviation world that we can apply in healthcare and it's starting to make a significant impact. You're familiar with some of them. For example, the good old checklist, right? Don't cut off the wrong leg. That's costly. What if we can use simple checklists in the OR, which have dramatically reduced mortality and morbidity by about 30%, as Atul Gawande has pioneered. Those are being appified across the spectrum of healthcare. We're learning to use the element of heads-up display, simulation, right? Planes are getting safer. We don't check our pilot when we get on the plane, but how can we now take the world of simulation and apply it to healthcare, to training new clinicians, surgeons, anesthesia simulators? This is going across the spectrum from simulating drugs and which pharma is going to work, so avoiding costly trials that won't work. At Stanford, we have an amazing sim lab, so it's going to move from the world of see one, do one, teach one, to see one, sim one, sim one, sim one, and then maybe do one, and then maybe teach one. The heads-up display, the cockpit. So my fighter pilots have moved from the world of round dials to the glass cockpit. So from analog to glass, and now you can present data, big data, in smart ways, the heads-up display. And there's different data needed if you're in a dogfight or if you're about to hit a mountain. In fact, there's something called Bitching Betty that the sound doesn't work. It says pull up as you're about to hit the mountain. Other cues can be in your environment in the clinical or the flying setting. I'm sure those of you who drive cars with real-time gas mileage adjust your driving. So the trick is to provide this right data, like a healthcare GPS, the right amount of data at the right time, not too much information, like a little overwhelmed. Okay, so last couple of examples from that would be how we see the world. There's the world now of technical assisted living contact lenses that are starting to be able to port the internet to your eyeball. We don't need to wait for those, however. Google announced earlier this year Google Glass. We mocked up a version of this summer. It's pretty trippy when you can see the world through your heads-up display, and that has interesting implications. Let's say you're on a date, and you maybe get some extra help. Maybe you pick up the Wingman app, for example, and get information about the world around you. So that's kind of fun, right? But what if we're using that in the clinical environment, right? To, again, look at vital signs or to pill up elements about ourselves. Or we're trying to lose weight, we might see our food one way, and now we might see it another way. This is where the cue is supposed to be, pull up, you're about to hit a mountain. So different cues, different ways to leverage this sort of technology. Now, if we look at one last area, that's radar. All this big data, all this connectivity, what's sort of siloed today, if we can see where other patients are, what else is happening in your healthcare system, what's the right path for therapy, kind of like this driving app like Google Maps. The drivers don't know it, but they're driving a map, they're building a map of Rome in one morning. You can see where the traffic jams are, where the police are hanging out, what's the fastest route to work. What if we can unsilo and unleash the data, the collective wisdom that we have in healthcare in similar ways? So in summary, we've sort of been flying blind today. A lot of medicine's empiric, point of care, random testing, random tests. We're not leveraging the power of biology quite yet. We're moving to an era where we're starting to use that crowdsourcing. Flu trends, for example, or other ways to know what's happening with your weather map in your neighborhood. Do you need to treat a patient in one neighborhood differently than another based on their social network data? Maybe in the future, it won't be too long before you'll get a text as you meet someone saying, don't shake hands with Tom today, it might be a little risky, based on their Facebook feeds or others. And that's already being mined by Facebook and others. So we'll have dashboards across the spectrum. We'll be leveraging these new technologies. We'll be connected in hopefully new, smart, and empowered ways that are hopefully being reimbursed by the payers. And we can apply smart design thinking. We can make these engaging and useful and more interactive. And move from an era that's, again, very episodic and reactive to one where we're continuous and proactive, and we catch things at stage 0 or stage 1 as opposed to stage 3 and 4 where we are today. So in summary, maybe we can think differently about just being an organ donor. Maybe we can start to be data donors. Maybe even our medical device and pharma companies can be data donors. Maybe we can, in my world of oncology, move to a world of truly personalized oncology where every tumor is sequenced. We use AI, we use collaboration to truly personalize therapy as we can sequence. In the clinical challenge of poor compliance and adherence, I've started a company out of Singularity University where we've developed a way to, instead of taking 5 pills a day, to take one that's printed and personalized to you and it can adapt and be printed each morning when you need it. So, I hope in summary, in this quick talk, I've make you think about the path and the power of exponentials, where the puck is going, the power of convergence and putting things together in new, powerful ways. So let's redefine healthcare and practice of medicine and pharma. And I think if we do that, we can sort of fly higher, faster, safer, and as Alan Kay said, realizing the future's already here in many ways, it's just not evenly distributed. And especially those of us in the room, we should know that the best way to predict the future is to go out there and create it. So let's use these technologies and build a better future. Thanks a lot.